Now, the spinal cord is obviously not a part of the peripheral nervous system. However, afferent nerves, which enter the spinal cord from the periphery, and efferent nerves, which leave the spinal cord on their way to the periphery, make up the bulk of the nerves which are found in the peripheral nervous system. So a short description of the organization of the spinal cord may help you to understand the structural relationships between the central and the peripheral nervous system. The spinal cord consists of a number of segments, and each segment has a pair of spinal nerves, here and here, carrying nerves to and from the periphery. These spinal nerves are mixed nerves, that is, they contain both afferent and efferent nerve fibers. Each of these spinal nerves is joined to its segment by a number of roots, and these roots are grouped either as dorsal or ventral roots. Dorsal roots contain only afferent or sensory nerves, while the ventral roots contain only efferent or motor nerves. But as you can see here, these dorsal roots and ventral roots are grouped together in a single nerve covered by a single epineurion to form a mixed spinal nerve. In cross-section, the spinal cord presents this butterfly-shaped inner material and the outer material surrounding this butterfly-shaped material. The butterfly-shaped structure is called the gray matter because that's the way it looks in fresh tissue, and the outer material is called white matter because that's the way it looks in fresh tissue. The gray matter contains neuronal cell bodies and their dendrites, as well as axons and glial cells. The white matter contains only myelinated and unmyelinated axons traveling to and from other parts of the spinal cord and the brain, and axons traveling to and from the periphery, and glial cells. This diagrammatic representation of the spinal cord shows this butterfly-shaped gray matter. The various parts of it are classified as the dorsal horn, the lateral horn, and the ventral horn. Sensory nerves enter the dorsal horn, synapse with interneurons as well as neurons going up and down the spine, and the ventral horn contains the cell bodies shown here of giant motor neurons, glial cells, as well as both myelinated and unmyelinated nerve fibers. The white matter, by contrast, shown here, contains only myelinated and unmyelinated nerve fibers, and of course this is connective tissue of the pia mater, which we'll look at a bit later. I mentioned earlier that the cell bodies of the unipolar sensory neurons carrying information from the periphery to the central nervous system are found in a ganglion, a collection of cell bodies called dorsal root ganglion on either side of the spinal cord. And this is a section through such a dorsal root ganglion containing the very large cell bodies of these unipolar neurons. This arrow here represents sensory information coming from the periphery, and this arrow here represents sensory information being carried to the spinal cord. This diagram here shows a magnified view of the cell body of one of these unipolar neurons. And what I want to point out here, in addition to the very large cell body with a very prominent nucleolus, are these cells which surround the cell body. This is an artifactual space here, and these cells are called satellite cells. They're another glial cell that is found in the dorsal root ganglion, and they completely envelop the perikaryon of this unipolar neuron and provide insulation and protection from infection, attack by infectious agents, as well as by antibodies. Just to remind you of the difference between the somatic and autonomic motor neurons, those are the neurons carrying information from the spinal cord to the periphery. In the case of the somatic motor neurons, a single neuron carries the information to the periphery, skeletal muscle. In the autonomic nervous system, a chain of two neurons carries the efferent or motor information from the spinal cord to the effector organ, shown here as glands, smooth muscle, cardiac muscle. These autonomic ganglia, in which the pre- and postganglionic neurons synapse, are situated in specific or fairly specific places in the body. In the sympathetic side of the autonomic nervous system, the ganglia are generally situated in a chain of ganglia called the sympathetic chain ganglia, which is very close to the spinal cord. They're also called the paravertebral ganglia, as well as in some ganglia situated outside of this chain of ganglia in the body cavity or close to the organs that they innervate. In the parasympathetic system, the ganglia in which the pre- and postganglionic neurons synapse are generally situated either very close to the organ that they innervate or within the organ that they innervate. Additionally, the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems generally have opposing actions. Thus, the sympathetic stimulation of the heart accelerates the heartbeat, slows the heartbeat on the parasympathetic side. Parasympathetic innervation constricts bronchi. Sympathetic stimulation dilates bronchi, but not always. Sometimes they will act in concert. Sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves also originate from different areas of the spinal cord. Thus, the parasympathetic neurons have their cell bodies in the cranial and sacral segments of the spinal cord and down towards our tailbone, whereas the origin of the sympathetic nerves is in the thoracic and lumbar sections of the spinal cord. And as I said, in the sympathetic system, the ganglia in which the pre- and post-ganglionic neurons make contact is in a chain of ganglia generally close to the spinal cord, whereas in the parasympathetic system, the ganglia are either in the organ that they innervated or very close to the organ that they innervate. And don't worry about this down here with the adrenal medulla. That's a special case, and you'll learn about that if you do the second half of this course. I've put this slide in here. You've seen this when I asked you to identify circular and longitudinal smooth muscle. You saw these structures along here. I didn't bother to tell you what they were at the time, but this is a chain of parasympathetic ganglia in between the two layers of smooth muscle. These nerves, the postganglionic nerve fibers emanating from these ganglia, are responsible for innervating the muscle layers surrounding the intestine. And you can easily see that these ganglia, these parasympathetic ganglia, are situated in the tissue that they're going to innervate. These ganglia are called Auerbach's plexus or the myenteric plexus, and it stretches throughout the digestive system. And finally, considering the peripheral nervous system, this is once again a ganglia between the layers of smooth muscle, showing you these nerve cell bodies. And I've put this slide up because quite early on anatomists discovered that the digestive system, the whole digestive system, had so many nerves innervating it that they called it the brain in the gut. And so what you will find is that that part of the autonomic nervous system that stimulates the whole digestive system has been given a separate name. It's called the enteric nervous system. It's still part of the autonomic nervous system, but the enteric nervous system refers to that part of the autonomic nervous system that serves the digestive system. And I should also mention that it's not just parasympathetic nerves that stimulate the gut, but of course there is also sympathetic stimulation of the whole digestive system. It's just that because these parasympathetic ganglia are so pretty and easy to see in our sections, that I brought these up as an example of the parasympathetic side of the enteric nervous system. But don't forget that the gut is also stimulated by sympathetic nerves.